I'm Anamitra Banerjee, Research Head at Indic Researchers Forum, and I'll also be your host for this session. As part of our two-day conference, we would really appreciate if you could kindly maintain decorum through the session. I request the panelists to switch on their videos as they deliver their speeches, while requesting others to kindly mute themselves. Please kindly refer to the chat box in case you have any questions, which we would address definitely at the end of the session. Moving along to our session, I would like to welcome our session chair, Mr. Harjeet Sandhu sir. Mr. Harjeet Sandhu sir is a senior police officer and a certified fraud examiner with over 35 years standing experience in the profession, and has had various time points in his career held high-level leadership positions in the field of law enforcement, counter-terrorism, war crimes, homicide investigations, including political assassinations, investigation of financial crimes, as well as financing of terrorism, and organized crime, including arms trafficking network, etc. As an IPS officer, he had served as a district police chief and was also the commanding officer of an armed battalion engaged with the counter-insurgency operations, a superintendent of the police in the elite anti-corruption and an oversight agency of the country, the CBI, that is the Central Bureau of Investigation. At international level, he had assignments with the Interpol, General Secretariat, UNSC, UN International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, Special Tribunal for Lebanon, where he had led investigations into international crime, drafting and editing reports, preparing policy guidelines, capacity building, and liaison with other international organizations. As expert, coordinator, and spokesperson for 5 panels of experts for UNSC, in persuasion of Resolution 1306, 1343, 1395, 1407, and 1408, relating to Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Somalia, he steered the terms of international experts monitoring the cases of UN sanctions and the global arms trafficking networks. Over the years, he had also provided services as a drug crime, OSCE, Serious Organized Crime Agency, the SOCA, the Commonwealth Secretariat. The reports which have been prepared by Mr. Harjeet Sandhu sir, along with the US agency FinCEN on Hawala and the money laundering in 2000, is being widely used by the law enforcement agency as well as the courts all over the world. He's also a senior advisory member for Indic Researchers Forums. Without further delay, I would hand over the floor to you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Anamitra. I think you gave, I had mentioned to give it very brief introduction, but you gave a detailed one. So about there are 2 things before starting I would like to say. One, that this, the last session, this is known as graveyard of the speakers. It is not only the last session of today, but it is last session of the 2-day conference. And some of us, those who have been listening to since yesterday, they must be almost really fed up that when it will be finished. So, but those who are fresh, they will feel that, oh, they haven't spoken much. And when you have a strong panel with you, then your job is made simple and at the same time difficult. What you need to speak and what you should leave for those experts, because I have a very distinguished panel. And I will introduce them at the time when each one is called. So I would start with that. Only I recognize that I have with me the experts, and one, of course, from my service, Jagannathan, then my good old friend, Dr. Devidas, and of course, Bryant, who is already saw since morning, 3 o'clock he logged into. So I will introduce them later, and Dr. Cherish. So let us get on the subject first. Let me see, I will try to stick to very limited time. No, this morning there was some discussion a lot. What is terrorism? People were giving like, there are so many types and all. If you can see this book here with me, now, this book, this is almost 1600 pages handbook of terrorism prevention and preparedness, edited by Dr. Alex Schmidt. He is also a good friend, and since 2001, he started work on this. And only in 2021, last year, he could produce it. And he used to discuss a lot with me, what is the definition of terrorism? You know, all over that. So I told him once that my favorite definition, despite so many definitions between 1936 and 81, 109 definitions were given by various agencies, none agreed. Then UN, Interpol, US agencies, UK agency, all of them gave definition. But my favorite is what Walter gave in 2004, like art or pornography, you know terrorism when you see it. So you don't need a definition. And terrorism is no longer the problem of one country. It has become a global problem. All of us are affected by it. I have been affected personally. My father was kidnapped by one of the terrorist groups, and we rescued him after 9 days. Few people I rescued while being in Northeast also. Sometimes in hot pursuit, you cross over to the next country and get the man. So a lot of those incidents. But coming back to that, why the international terrorism scene changed after 9/11? Now, I give you very briefly one anecdote. In 1999, FATF organized a conference. This conference was FATF's, first it was meeting of ad hoc group on non-cooperative countries and territories in Washington, DC. On 16, 17 November, it was a confidential, I was part of that group. And next day, 18 November 1999, FinCEN Director James Sloan hosted this. Attorney General was also there. This was in the Ronald Reagan Center, Washington, DC. Now, I made a presentation on Hawala Alternative Remittance System and its role in money laundering and financing of terrorism. I finished this with the last concluding part that I am representing Interpol here, but I come from India and I have seen it that Hawala is heavily being used by terrorist groups in financing. I have seen it. So if we do not tackle it now, mark my words, within 5 or 10 years, the whole world will be facing it. Now, interesting part, I think Bryant will know some of those people, James Sloan, who was the director there. So when I said this statement, I forgot. Afterwards, I went to Security Council and came back. Then suddenly, after 9/11, 1 week after, I received a phone call from one Catherine. She said she is secretary of Senator Baye. I don't know how, B-A-Y-H. So she said, I am secretary of that. And which country are you? First, she sent email. I said, I am very much in your country. This is my mobile number of UN. She talked to me. So they wanted me to testify before House Finance Committee. I think Bryant has worked subsequently with that committee. So when his turn, he can give that. But point is, till 9/11 happened, they did not bother. I mean, it was our problem. Hawala, oh, what is that Hawala? In Canadian newspapers and US newspapers, openly advertisements were given. I shared those advertisements during my presentation. I may still be having some in my old, somewhere on my USB, but nowadays, that time it was not USB. We used to have floppy disks and all. So after that, they immediately started contacting me. I said, I am now, that day when 9/11 happened, I was in Sierra Leone, sitting with the Chief of Defense Services, they're discussing something. When on TV, they started. So within 1 week, I went back. Then everybody wanted to speak to me. The USA there, they wanted me to testify that how Hawala is being used for financing terrorism. So this is one part. So after that, every organization, Interpol was created in 1914. But immediately after that 9/11, then Interpol created a command and control center, CCC, with 24/7 hours service, so that they can cater to all, and terrorism was given. I think Jagannathan will discuss more details on that. Then FATF, it had 40 recommendations, but then immediately after 9/11, they added 9 more on the terrorism financing. Every organization, Commonwealth Secretariat, Dr. Devi Raj was expert consultant with that, and they did capacity building in so many countries. But again, after 9/11. So it proves that what in my 4 decades of law enforcement experience I learned, that every tragedy gives you an opportunity, is how well you use that opportunity to develop a solid system. So afterwards, all of them, Interpol, FATF, then Commonwealth Secretariat, then at national level, USA, they enacted Patriot Act on 24 October 2001. I was actually speaking to the law faculty in Temple University, Philadelphia that day when somebody called me that Patriot Act has been enacted, because my Hawala paper was circulated to all the senators as a background information at that time. So this is a point where all these, and of course other panelists, they will go over more details. Then there are other 2 parts that we will cover in this session. So that one is, let me come to that. One is crypto and virtual currency. Cryptocurrency, sometimes just they call it crypto, is any form of currency that exists digitally or virtually and uses cryptography to secure transactions. So that will be covered. Then there will be, last one will be international legal framework to combat money laundering and terror financing. Because a lot of people keep on putting these together, money laundering and terror financing. Yes, money laundering is an old problem, but when you see, I would like to quote one historical, rather prehistorical time incident with you, that money laundering, where this started. The Roman Emperor Vespasian, he put a tax first time on the use of public toilets, and his son Titus objected. He said, the money is dirty, it smells bad. Vespasian had the treasurer to go to storehouse and bring back some coins which have been washed on their receipt. He held them on to his son and declared, non olet, it does not smell. So I think most of the world banks should put this as a banner outside their banks, non ole, that it does not stink, even though we know that sometimes the money does stink. And very simple difference between money laundering and terrorist financing. Money laundering, of course, is the money is coming from some dirty actions, whatever they do to crime or wrongdoing, and want to make it clean. Whereas in terrorist financing, most of the time it is a clean money, whether charities are financing it or whether it is coming like Osama bin Laden from his own business and others. So where a clean money is made into dirty money. So now with that, I will start with the first presentation of the day, of the session, of this session. That is role of Interpol in the global efforts in combating terrorism. And the key speaker for this is Mr. Jagannathan Saravanasamy. And Mr. Jagannathan, I know he is from my service, so he has put in 32 years in the service. Prominent ones, I will say that he was Inspector General of State Human Rights Commission in the Indian state of Maharashtra. And in Interpol, he was also Assistant Director in the Financial Crimes Subdivision, so that dealt with the money laundering, economic crime, and financing of terrorism. So I can give each speaker's introduction for a long time, but just to put it short, so I invite Mr. Jagannathan to make his presentation. Mr. Jagannathan, over to you.
Good evening, sir. And you being the senior colleague in my service, and also my predecessor in Interpol, you have spoken fairly elaborately on the topic we are going to cover. And on the panel, I also have my senior colleague, Mr. Dash. In fact, for a brief period, we were working together in Interpol, in CBI. And, after your elaborate speech, In fact, the theme or the way I would like to take the topic is like this. Basically, I'm drawing from my own experience. In fact, I've started my career with about 5 years in the left-wing extremist affected area. It was the peak of the time from 92 to 96 or so. Subsequently, of course, I also had, as you rightly said, I had an experience with the Interpol, where I had, have been associated with this very many international organizations and very many international treaties and the law enforcement cooperation. And I have formed certain opinion about, there are many, yeah, go to the next, please. Yeah, next one. Yeah. See, this is where like I have to start. I thought I'll start from. If you see this, see, after all this terrorism, what we know of terrorism, say before probably 1979, before, the Iranian Revolution and before the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, it used to be in this area of, this Central America. It used to emanate out of this narco-terrorism, and all the incidents were generally about, even the terror incidents, it were connected with that. That was the first phase, I would say. The second probably happens here in this Middle East region. That is probably around 1975 onwards, and then it intensified after 79 till about 92. So that is where it's these two terrorism, these regions. If you see the Central America as well as in the Northeast, even the Middle East. Even in the Middle East, to start with, it had a left orientation, like this, what we had in the Central American region. It is only after probably, these two, from 79 to 1992, 93, if we see, around about 98, 99 or so, this terrorism took a shift. What used to be, the most of the incident used to take place out of this narco-terrorism, it shifted to, the primacy was acquired. Primacy, this Middle East terrorism acquired a prominence somewhere around 86, 87, and it peaked in about 92, 93. Then that is where probably we come to a different kind of terrorism in the year around 87, 88 onwards, and that's how it was going. From 92, 93 onwards, probably, the third turning point I would say is this 1988, that, this fatwa issued by Bin Laden and his company, and that gave rise to, this prominence of terrorism arising out of this, the present day Afghan India, that kind of a territory, and that gives a completely different shape to that, terrorism, impact of terrorism. In fact, the turning point I would say is that after, the 2001 attack, 9/11 attack, and subsequent to this 2003, this invasion of Iraq, that for weapons of mass destruction, on the pretext, and the nature of terrorism once again takes a shift. And from 2004 onwards, this ISIS comes into picture, and the nature of terrorism takes another shift. And the fallout of that ISIS-induced terrorism is this, what you see in this Central African region terrorism. And of course, there are other areas of terrorism. What we see in India and all is this, for example, the central part of India and all other, this thing is specific to the countries. The central part of, in India, what we have is primarily left-wing extremists associated with incidents. Next slide, please. This is where what I was trying to, it is in the graphical form. If you see from 2004, 2005 onwards, there is a peak, incidents, number of incidents, intensity of incidents, all that are going up. Now, the coincidence here I would really like to see here is, in fact, that is where, from the international effort in containing terrorism also almost coincides, I would say, from, say, 1988, 89, 90 onwards, starting from that, United Nations Conventions Against Organized Crime. Subsequently, in fact, after 2001, 2002, the number of sanctions from the UN Security Council after 2001. But surprisingly, what I would like all of us to appreciate, are we, even though we do have so many international treaties, so many international organizations, intergovernmental organizations, international organizations working on that, despite so many, Security Council resolutions, the terrorism also has moved up. So what does it mean? Are we trying to say that whatever the efforts we are making is insufficient? That may be one possibility. Or second thing is that the counterfactual argument that without even that kind of an international effort, maybe we may be, facing still more higher form of terrorism. Is that argument correct? Or the argument that whatever the international treaties, efforts, what we are having, it is having probably a positive effect in some part of the territory, and the negative or not so positive effect in the other part of the territory, that could be the reason? Or all these treaties and the efforts, are they not probably addressing the root cause of the issues? These are the questions I would like to probably consider, since it is a research forum and there are a lot of eminent speakers. The point simply is that international efforts are also increasing, but at the same time the terrorism also increasing. Then the question is why? Are we missing on something? That's what it is. Next slide, please. This is how it is. You see the shift. Maybe from 2014-15 onwards, the epicenter of terrorism is shifting towards South Asia. If you go by the number of incidents or the number of deaths, it's phenomenally, it has increased. It is the South Asian region which is the affected area. Of course, Middle East and North Africa region has been there from the day we started terrorism. That has been the epicenter, but now probably it is moving towards east, moving towards South Asia, and that is becoming the center. That is the point I want to make. And the other emerging area is, of course, this sub-Saharan African region. I'll come later. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. If you see this thing, though South Asia, ranks high in number of deaths, but when it comes to number of deaths, sub-Saharan Africans take the second place. That is the number of, which means the intensity of the terrorism incidents in the sub-Saharan region is quite high. Next slide, please. This probably, here the only point to make here is, there are certain, the intensity of the attack, where it is increasing, that is what, the change in, over from the previous year. If we look at the statistics, it is once again the sub-Saharan African countries, especially Ethiopia, this Congo region and all that, is the number of attacks as well as the number of deaths. It's quite high in this region. Fortunately for India, the change is over the previous year. We are coming down. Even in the number of deaths also probably we are coming down. But this cannot be this trend may or may not hold, especially in the wake of 2001 August, where Taliban has taken the rule on Afghanistan. We don't know whether this trend will going to hold or not. That only time will tell. Next slide, please. This is another very interesting slide out of research I have found out. see this, what has happened. After all, everybody's argument here is the Islamic terror, the basic, the fountainhead of Islamic terror, people say, and the experts say, it is, of course, the reason being the Israeli-Arab conflict. But that has been there from 1948 onwards, at least from 1967 onwards. This conflict between Israel and Arab countries are there. But surprisingly, this Islamic terrorism, as per the graph goes, it has taken an upswing from 2000. It started taking an upswing from 2000, probably 10, 11, and it has suddenly taken an upswing in 2013, 14, and all that. The orange is that, the annual incidence of Islamic terror, the country-wise, and the thick brown, the bar is the total number of countries which have experienced the Islamic terror, which stands as of today, it's about 60 countries in the world. They are facing this Islamic terror. But why all these things are happening, despite all our international efforts? That's what probably we all of us will have to ponder to. Next slide, please. This is here only one point I would like to emphasize here. There is a general decline in terrorism-related incidents in the West, especially in the United States. It has recorded the lowest, from since 2012. It has been recording the lowest number of terror incidents. Whatever terror incidents it is happening in the United States, it is for political reasons, for the internal reasons, rather than for any religious reasons. So this is a very telling point. Whether does it have any relationship with the various international treaties and international efforts that the United States of America has started seeing less number of terrorism compared to the Middle East, or in fact the Middle Eastern part, and then Middle East, Asia, as well as the South Asia? Is there any what I mean to say is the international efforts are having not uniform effect on the terrorism in across the regions. That's what the question I wanted to raise. Next slide, please. Of course, now when we speak of international terror acts, the IS and IS-induced terrorism has already taken precedence, or in fact, it has overtaken this, Taliban and Al-Qaeda related, induced effects. But of course, as many speakers have told in the last 2 days conference, probably they're in the background, both of them are the same. That is one point. Other point I would like to make here is, this is the point, this drugs are being employed as a very, very cost-effective, low-cost, low-risk, but high impact weapon of terrorism. This is what probably we are seeing in India, especially in Punjab, in other parts, of many parts of western part of India, and in many other states. And going by the number of very, very high, huge quantity consignments being seized on the western coast, drugs are being employed as a very, very soft, cost-effective, and low-risk weapon in terrorism. And this is a new trend. And another trend probably is, inciting lawlessness. That's also probably is a very, very new methodology which is emerging. I don't think these kind of methods, when employed, I don't think any international, treaty, any mutual legal assistance treaty will be able to assist us in dealing this kind of terrorism. That's what the issue I wanted to flag. Next slide, please. Coming to this the link between organized criminal group and terror group. Of course, the strategic aim of criminal gang is money. The strategic aim of terrorism is political change. But it is a fact that the organized criminal gangs also employ terror tactics. The purpose is the purpose is only to not only to intimidate and then maintain their the upper hand, but it is also to gain some kind of legitimacy. In the similar manner, terrorist group also employ organized crime tactics. I can very well say out of my own experience, this Maoist groups, this Naxalite group, which is otherwise a very, very dreaded terrorist group, but they very much employ all this organized criminal gang tactics for extortion of money from every contractor. Either they do themselves or they employ their own, the local or the village level people. So that is basically to gain money. So what I mean to say is, organized criminal group and terrorist group, both of them are on the same continuum, or on the continuum on a metamorphic scale. So it's very difficult. Both of them are dependent on each other on many occasions for money, for logistical support, and all that. In fact, if you go by this foreign terrorist this thing, and foreign terrorists fighting in this for the IS, many of them they are found to have criminal records. Next slide, please. And in fact, straight away I come to this last point. Nearly 60% of the cocaine trade and 90% of the world's opium trade originate in the regions which is dominated by insurgent groups. So here is the very clear-cut link between drugs, criminal gang, and organized on terrorist group. This one simple fact will establish that. Next slide, please. Now, coming to this, how we all started this international effort. Of course, as I briefly told this, and I'll come to the straight away the last point. See, we all had international effort. I mean, lot many international efforts were there even prior to this 9/11. Even FATF is 1989, creation of 1989. But the way the FATF functions, like it used to have 39 recommendations, and finally subsequent 10 recommendations came after 9/11. So basically, what is an organization which was created to recommend standards for protecting the financial institutions from the threat of money laundering. The same methodologies were employed for tackling terrorism. So now, whether the point I'm trying to make is whether it ended up in an overkill. That's what I wanted to make. Next slide, please.
Yeah, Mr. Jaganathan, is very interesting, but if you could wind up in next few minutes.
2 minutes. I'll just take 2 minutes, please. So now, see the points I wanted to make, I have already covered. Now, I would, before I end, I would only take my own, draw from my personal experience, and what the eminent speaker general spoke yesterday about 3 Ps and 4 Es when it comes to tackling terrorism. For this, I would like to say that, take the example of this Gadchiroli district, which is a very highly terrorism-infected district. This last 2 years of this thing, in fact, the entire left-wing extremism has been primarily handled by the state police with an assistance of central police organization. If one success, if you have to say, in India, we can rightfully, though it is not fully this thing, but we can legitimately claim in tackling left-wing extremism, we had a very reasonably great success. I would suggest that in the last 2 years, if you see, I'll come to this 3 Ps: preemptive, punitive, preventive. I would come to this, how the Gadchiroli police, they've changed the tactics in the last 3 years is, like, instead of taking out many more operations, they have concentrated on 3 things. One is that very specific intelligence, tech complemented by human intelligence, that they had started very, very pinpointed intelligence. Number 2 point, that is preemptive. What did they do for preemptive? Wherever the Naxal camps are likely to be held, they had extensively surveyed those camps, sites, and then did dry runs. And whenever there is used to be a camp, then with that help of this pinpointed intelligence, tech and human intelligence, they were able to go and surround them. And then it was they went for a massive attack, intelligence-led massive attack. The last 2 years, it is a very heartening to say, 2 very higher level Naxal commanders and about 54 armed Naxals have been eliminated with no casualty to the police. That was a great success. The principal strategic initiative taken was this preemptive attack and intelligence. Now, side by side, only one point I would like to say.
Interrupt. We are focusing more on the international in this session. So I know that is
okay.
The problem is each issue in this is a separate subject.
Okay. Now let me
come to the concluding part.
Okay. Let me come to that last point on this international cooperation, the role of Interpol. That is what you have to speak about. The Interpol is an organization which was, it is an organization of national police networked through secure communication. This serves 3 purposes. So any incidents of any crime, including terrorism related incidents, if it is exchanged through this communication, it is stored in that Interpol's database, which is available for any country to refer to any time. So that is number 1. Number 2 is that notices. See, this is a very time immemorial this thing, and it is even serving very well even today. That is on notice on any criminal information and the criminal's information and the crime he has committed. As long as the country's court has issued a warrant that is published, and the member countries even today are detaining these criminals, including terrorist criminal. Number 3. So the number 3 is, of course, this capacity building program. This is what the Interpol does, and it is a practical and useful tool in the hands of member countries. So in concluding, I would like to only say that, of course, this international organization treaties are there. It is only it should only help the member countries to beat around, not to be beaten up by other countries. What I mean to say is that you should use them wherever it is possible to secure assistance from other countries, and you should use it to for your, gaining diplomatic influence. Otherwise, terrorism, whichever is the form, it has to be won by your own capabilities, your own intelligence, and nothing else. And of course, the economic, the point is that we should not be, cribbing on terrorism is, stalling economic progress. It is in fact the other way. It is the economic progress which can stall terrorism. So with this, I conclude, because I wanted to, throw the issues. This all of us know what does UN do, what does the FATF do, and all that. But why things are in this path? That's what I wanted to make a point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. If time permits, in the end, we will definitely come to that during discussion. But just to sum up, of course, Mr. Jagannathan gave excellent account of global trends and the terrorist cases, both increasing. Like, you have the efforts increasing and you have the cases increasing. So to me, it looks like it is the case of when they say the law should have more teeth. I say rather than having more teeth, you should have a more rational dental arrangement and a will to chew or will to bite people, so that their commitment they really want to do, that's all. And definitely the two key events which happened in the history, Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, where the 7 groups, then they disintegrated and terrorism increased. Some of them in US were openly saying that we have defeated only one superpower. The second superpower is still there, and they were speaking in that country, and 2 CIA operatives reported it, but they were told, no, they are not doing any of that. Same thing happened in London with Abu Hamza al-Masri in Finsbury Park Mosque. He was openly radicalizing. He participated, his son went to Libya, he participated in USS Cole attack. So all of that. Then came word Islamic statement of where these 5 prominent organizations. So the trend was increasing, but 9/11 was which put the shift on the fighting, the combating part was where all organizations then took over that. So having finished with the Interpol's role, so our next speaker will be Dr. Devi Prasad Das.
There were some network issues, so we can continue.
Mr. I think Ramananda Sengupta, yeah, if you could, if all others could go mute, please. Yeah, there was one. Anyway, so coming to the second part, which is role of United Nations in combating international terrorism. And I think there could not be a better person rather than Dr. Devi Prasad Das, because he worked with the Commonwealth Secretariat as a consultant on the terrorism. And when Commonwealth Secretariat was doing all the capacity building all over that, and he organized a lot of those trainings. Of course, he invited me also in some of those to participate. And without reading from his biography, because I know it by heart, his unique introduction is that he has been a customs officer, police officer, a banker, and a lawyer, all in one single person. And plus his doctorate on terrorism again. So I will not go into more details. He's currently with the UN Security Council also. So over to Dr. Devi Prasad Das for the role of United Nations. And please try to, I know each of us have a lot to speak. The subject is very wide. Like if you want to speak on any one of these roles, having worked there, we can speak for hours together. But please keep in mind the 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my good friend Mr. Hadith Sandhu, and in fact, other friend Jagannathan spoke a lot about the global research findings, and that's pretty interesting. And I would like to stick to the time, but let me tell you, as you rightly said, the last day, last session is the graveyard. The only good thing or fortunate part of me is I unfortunately couldn't participate any of the sessions. So I haven't heard about those P's and the E's, and I haven't heard of what others said. So that's, in hindsight, probably a kind of good fortune for me. But those who have been attending, like the other gentleman who was there from 3 o'clock in the morning, probably would find at times some repetition. So kindly excuse me for that. Jagannathan did mention and raise very interesting points that after a particular phase, there has been increase in the incident of terrorist attacks, both in terms of the fatality in some regions, and also in terms of the number of attacks that the global field have been witnessing. And what could be the reason, in spite of so many treaties, conventions, and all that coming to the fruition? Is it that we have failed in that, or is there something wrong in that? So since I would be, speaking on the role of the United Nations, I thought I will start with that. The question is, when we talk of United Nations, we actually talk of united actions as well. So when we don't have unity in that, and then everything else would fail. United Nations, certainly in a treaty or in a resolution, can't make a domestic law. So if it can only come out with a blueprint and can give a DNA, can come out with an overview or some kind of outline of the problem and the solution, and leave it to the sovereign member states to implement in all letter and spirit. Unfortunately, where we fail is the implementation mechanism. I'll just give one small reading from the 1373 resolution of the UN Security Council, which is been considered as literally the turning point in UN's efforts against terrorism. One, it says, it decides that all states shall prevent and suppress the financing of terrorist acts. It says criminalize the willful provision or collection by any means, directly or indirectly, of funds by their nationals or in their territories. Now, you see such a sentence which has so many aspects: directly, indirectly, knowingly, and then provision, collection by any means. So this would cover everything, including the other gentleman who was speaking about cryptocurrency being used, someone speaking about artificial intelligence. Now the question is, all these are basic tools. The UN can, in its resolution or in the instrument, what we call convention or a treaty, can say directly, indirectly, by any means. Now it's left to the ingenuity of the member state to think how robust they can, how comprehensive they can make their own domestic legislative framework and the executive machinery to ensure that it is not only prevented, but if it happens, then it is combated well to the extent of a comprehensive prosecution mechanism. That unfortunately is not happening, and as a result of which you find that with 192 members, there are 192 different kinds of laws, and the same thing is being interpreted differently by different national courts. So when you don't have a common comprehensive convention on terrorism, when we don't know what is terrorism, then naturally it is left to the interpretation of different states, different countries. Mr. Sandhu did mention the problem about definition, and that till date remains as an international problem, but domestically we do have our own legislations which define those acts in some form or the other, and probably days won't be very far off when we have a comprehensive convention on terrorism by the United Nations, and probably that to some extent would help us handle this particular problem that we've been facing till now. As you know, there's neither a comprehensive universal treaty or international terrorism, nor any universal agreement on the definition. This is the bane that the international community is facing for ages. And what we have instead is a universal legal framework against terrorism. And this particular framework is primarily of three things. One is the 19 international instruments, which we always call as universal instruments against terrorism. Then the UN Security Council resolutions and the General Assembly resolutions. These three, they combined together constitute the universal legal framework against the terrorism. But in the absence of a definition, the international community hasn't really kept quiet. They thought of coming out with a more practical manner by taking up sectoral approach in a particular sphere which was vulnerable to terrorist attacks, and then they went on having treaties and conventions on that. So if you find these 19 instruments, they started from 1963 with the Tokyo Convention, and primarily it was the aviation sector which had witnessed a large number of terrorist threats, attempts, and attacks, including, of course, the latest being the much talked about 9/11, when the aircraft was used as a weapon to crash into the World Trade Center and to cause large-scale civilian casualties. But the aviation sector per se has been in the focus from 1963. A series of plane hijackings in the 60s and 70s, these actually triggered negotiations, and then we adopted several treaties relating to this particular aviation sector. As you know, initially, as we went along, the treaties were limited in their scope, something when it talked about attack on the aircraft, when it talked about when in flight, when it happened that hijacking happened, when it happened on the ground. So as and when attacks happened, then the new treaties came up and that covered that particular aspect. But there was no comprehensive treaty, even with respect to the aviation sector. So we learned as we progressed. Similar incidents, of course, led to adoption of international conventions in different sectors, such as hostage taking, offenses committed against internationally protected persons, including diplomatic agents. And in the maritime sector, you would have heard about 1985 and the Achille Lauro incident, which led to, again, a new convention for the suppression of unlawful acts against the safety of maritime navigation. And in the course of the last 50 years, we have seen many conventions, nuclear convention, hostages convention, safety of fixed platforms located on the continental shelf, then explosives convention, bombings convention, the financing convention that we spoke at length of 1999, and the Convention Against Nuclear Terrorism of 2005. Now, these had their own advantages and disadvantages as well. It never defined any particular act as a terrorist act. But diplomatically and practically and very smartly, it made a particular act which everyone knows, like Mr. Sandhu said, like a pornography you see, then you understand. So you know that this is a terrorist act. So international community deliberately didn't define, except in Financing Convention of 99, rest all they never defined this as a terrorist act, and they only prohibited and they ensured that there is more of international cooperation among the member states. And when we talk of international cooperation, role of the United Nations, and this is the framework which was laid, and Security Council played a very major role, because as you all know that Security Council has the most important responsibility of ensuring international peace and security. And under the Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, it has the power to pass resolutions which would be binding on the member states. So such a powerful instrument which is with the Security Council, and they have not been very consistent in using this particular power. You find that when we talked about Lockerbie incident, the Security Council went hyper. They imposed sanctions, first threat of sanction against Libya, and then imposed sanctions on them. And then finally, very interestingly, I think the speaker who would follow me later talk about the legal aspects may touch on this particular point, that on the one hand, the international instruments talked about the basic principle of or they there or judicare. That means prosecute or extradite. This option is given to a member state. If any terrorist state found in the territory of that particular member state, it can either go ahead, investigate and prosecute, or extradite to the other country where he may be required to undergo the prosecution. In this case, in Lockerbie, in the Montreal Convention, also mentioned about this doctrine of extradite or prosecute, and Libya decided to prosecute. But because those two suspects were Libyans, the international community, and particularly the UN Security Council members, they were apprehensive. Probably the investigation would not be doing justice, and they may be let off, and the investigation should happen in a different country. And because of that, the UN Security Council, forced Libya to extradite those two persons. Otherwise, there would be further sanctions on Libya. And because of that, very interestingly, Lockerbie case, those who are doing research on that would find that Libya handed over those two accused persons to the UN. UN took them to a neutral country in Netherlands, where the trial happened in a place which was temporarily that was ceded to UK, because Lockerbie is a place in Scotland. So United Kingdom took that particular piece of land from Netherlands temporarily on lease, and on that, in that building, the trial happened in a neutral country, and finally he was convicted. End result is unfortunately totally different. I wouldn't like to touch on that in this particular one, but the UN went overdrive and took a stand which was contrary to the Montreal Convention and forced Libya to hand over the accused. At the same time, there have been many such incidents happening all over the world, including in India, and Security Council has not taken that kind of hyper role what it has taken in post 9/11 on in some countries which are permanent members of the UN Security Council. To that extent, the role of UN Security Council has not been very, very uniform. But leaving aside that, 9/11, which is considered as a turning point, over there, it really came out in a very, very impactful manner, coming out with resolution 1373. And though it didn't, again, use the words terrorism or terrorist acts, but the scope of this was truly transnational, and pure domestic offenses were excluded from the purview. And it, more importantly, urged the states to extend mutual legal assistance in matters pertaining to all forms of terrorism by the non-state actors. Now, another very important aspect, all these instruments till now, their focus was on the non-state actors. And what we've been missing till now, that the instruments are silent on state-sponsored terrorism. And you know what I mean. When we talk about that, there are few rogue states who do sponsor in a major way. And Jagannathan did mention about the number of attacks in South Asia being very high. We do have a SAARC convention, but many of the members have not yet ratified that. And if forget about that, they do not understand the basic international obligation of extraditing when India wanted under 20, some of the accused persons of 2611 to be extradited, and they didn't do it. So when there is no cooperation bilaterally in the same region, in spite of having a regional instrument, now international instruments are too far off. Now, in this particular aspect, I think what we lack is a true spirit among the member states, and we've been selective in extending cooperation, but very selective in stopping all kinds of means going into different fora and ensuring that we do not extend the desired cooperation which is required. In 1999, the UN General Assembly adopted again another landmark instrument called the Financing of Convention. This again was much before 9/11. So it's not that everything followed 9/11. There were also a lot of initiatives which were there. But as you know, General Assembly's resolutions, though it was by consensus, was mostly recommendatory in nature. But it was again 1373 post 9/11, the Security Council gave that force to this financing convention by incorporating within its framework that financing of terrorism has to be made law in every member state of the United Nations. It was made mandatory through the 1373. It's a very powerful message to the international community. Now, after that, the UN came out with a strategy in 2006. As you know, when you talk of a strategy, it had 4 pillars. One was very important. It said one has to take measures to address the conditions which are conducive to the spread of terrorism. Now, what is that condition? It can be poverty, it can be misinformation, it can be religion, it can be anything, incitement. So what are the conditions which are conducive to the spread of terrorism? They need to be addressed. It's not that you have all the time only police, all the time you have arms and ammunition. It's not that. You need to have a socio-economic analysis of those background as well. And the second was that the state's capacity to prevent and combat and to strengthen the role of the UN system. This was again another key factor of that strategy. And more importantly,
Thank you, Dr. Devidas. Can you sum up in?
and just coming to
2 minutes?
the last
Thank
2
you.
points,
Yeah.
that it said that the measures to ensure respect for human rights for all and the rule of law as the fundamental basis of the fight against terrorism. Because unfortunately, what happens, we quite often go overdrive, and the human rights of the accused person, human rights of the victims, we don't try to balance, and a fine balance between the two, that enforcement and respect for human rights are very important. And the UN now, over a period of time, has been focusing on the respect for human rights, and it has covered in resolutions kidnapping by terrorist groups, foreign terrorist fighters, and incitement. And at the same time, the link is what Jagannathan mentioned, terrorism and the organized crime. It came out with specific resolution on that. And the last but not the least is the Global Coordination Compact. As you know, UN is a huge system, and there are many departments which discuss and handle various aspects. So for the first time in 2018, UN launched the Global Coordination Compact, and this is about 43 UN entities, Interpol, the World Customs Organization, they all joined together, and their main objective of this new body is to strengthen a common UN action to support member states in the balanced implementation of the UN strategy and other relevant UN resolutions and the mandates. Now, UN has been criticized a lot as well, and UN is pretty much aware of its own shortcomings, and they have come out with regular global implementation survey of 1373 and other resolutions, and they're trying to see what went wrong, what can be done, so that the world is better prepared to combat terrorism more effectively. But let me tell you one thing: India has been playing a very major role in the UN, and it had proposed a draft document on the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism way back in 1986. But unfortunately, because of political differences, there has not been the convention. But currently, India's permanent representative to the UN is the chairman of the Security Council's Counter-Terrorism Committee for the year 2022. So I do hope that since terrorism is a transnational phenomenon, and the United Nations, with its global reach and multilateral tools, is the most appropriate forum to formulate and adopt a truly global legal policy response and countermeasures with global acceptability. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Devi Prasad Das. It's absolutely brilliant, and definitely we have shortage of time, otherwise would have gone on that. And very quickly, I will say, yes, UN Security Council has a key role to play, but the biggest challenge that is the veto. When it is one of the countries they don't want, we all know what happened with those perpetrators of 26/11. I lost quite a good friend there. Hemant Karkare was a good friend, chief of ATS. He lost his life there, and Sabina Sehgal-Sekia, that chief editor, also died in that. So and really, when it comes to getting those people as designated terrorists, always China will object, or using veto is all. I don't want to go into that misuse of veto power or use of veto to stop some things, but definitely India, being the chair of UN Counter-Terrorism Committee at this time, before this term expires, hope they will be able to get something more concrete. Thank you very much for that. And now our next session is on crypto and virtual currencies and their role in money laundering and financing of terrorism. Dr. Cherish Abela Grech. She comes from the beautiful country of Malta, a lovely, beautiful island. And she is senior associate at GTG Advocates there and expert in corporate matters, including compliance and anti-money laundering matters. So the floor is all yours, Dr. Cherish Abela Grech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Perfect.
Yes, ma'am.
So let me just put on my presentation. Start off with some basic stuff. So 13 years have now passed since the launch of Bitcoin, which is to date the largest cryptocurrency by market cap. These last years have seen a significant increase in the number of cryptocurrencies in circulation, as well as the growing number of crypto service providers. The rise of cryptocurrencies, however, has also led to their use for money laundering and the financing of terrorism. So during this presentation, we will be delving into some of the AML challenges that are faced by operators when dealing with virtual currencies.
Just a second, ma'am. I'm
Sure.
presenting your presentation. You can just let me know when to change the next slide.
Sure. So you can just go to the second slide. Perfect. Okay. So initial coin offerings, which are often termed as ICOs, became an increasingly popular investment vehicle for startups because they were shut out by traditional venture capital channels, and they were seen as an option that was not bogged down by the same level of regulation as traditional securities. An ICO is pretty much the equivalent of an IPO in cryptocurrency terms. Unfortunately, the rise of these ICOs came with additional risks, particularly because they were being used as a vehicle for money laundering and the funding of terrorism. This was primarily because they were not regulated, and so they were seen as a very useful tool by criminals, basically. By blindly redeeming cryptocurrency for tokens, ICO issuers would potentially be swapping cryptocurrency, legitimate cryptocurrency, for other types of tokens that originated from illicit activity. And they would then be sold for traditional currency. So you would have a mixture of legitimate tokens, legitimate funds being mixed with tokens or funds obtained illegitimately. The lack of record keeping in these ICOs, together with the large sums involved and the speed at which they occur on the blockchain, make them an attractive money laundering vehicle, especially for the proceeds of cybercrime. Europol has highlighted that the use of cryptocurrencies as a part of criminal schemes is increasing, particularly as criminals have also become more sophisticated in their use of cryptocurrencies. In addition to using cryptocurrencies to conceal money flows as part of increasingly complex money laundering schemes, cryptocurrencies are increasingly used by criminals as a means of payment or as an investment fraud currency. The UK FCA has in fact warned that a significantly high number of cryptocurrency firms that were seeking to be licensed in the UK had failed the test because only 13% of those applicants met the standards set by the EU's 5th AML directive. So although over these last years we have seen an increasing number of operators in this sphere, however, unfortunately, AML-CFT is not being taken seriously enough. Change slide, please. So we are now going to look at some techniques that are used in the crypto sphere to mask transactions. Structuring is a pretty common concept under AML. We're all pretty much aware of it. It involves breaking down a transaction into smaller amounts to remain below AML thresholds. This is also a technique that is commonly used with cryptocurrencies. One criminal network was in fact found to have collected large sums from various criminal groups. They converted the traditional currencies, which we call fiat currencies, on crypto to crypto exchanges, and then transferred those cryptocurrencies to the wallet of another criminal organization. This is why it is important to ensure that crypto exchanges are deemed to be subject persons for AML purposes. Next slide. We also have the presence of what we call crypto mixers or crypto tumblers. The terms are used interchangeably. This type of software program helps confuse the trail of crypto transactions by associating unrelated funds together using various methods. So one of the main advantages of using the blockchain is having a constant trail which cannot be altered of all the transactions that are taking place. However, we still find the presence of these types of programs that try to confuse this trail. So if an address's anonymity has been compromised, the funds can be cleaned using a tumbler. So to give you an example of this method, let's say a criminal purchases Bitcoin with fiat currency, with traditional currencies from a known exchange. This would be traceable on the blockchain. because because Bitcoin is deemed to be pseudo-anonymous. We'll come to that in a bit. To hide the trail, mixing software is used. The Bitcoins are mixed with other Bitcoins from other users in a pool. The coins are then sent to a mixing software, and the software sends these out to different addresses. The US Department of Treasury has, in fact, just earlier this month banned Americans from using the service of cryptocurrency mixer called Tornado Cash because it was being used to launder the proceeds of cybercrimes. Tornado Cash repeatedly failed to impose effective controls to stop the laundering of funds for malicious cyber actors, and it was found to lack basic measures to address its risks. Next slide. As I was saying, Bitcoin is not completely anonymous. On the one hand, we have the blockchain, which shows how many Bitcoins were sent from which address and when. On the other hand, without any additional information, it is impossible to connect a Bitcoin address to a real-life identity. So Bitcoin is considered to be pseudo-anonymous. Most cryptocurrencies we find are in fact pseudo-anonymous, meaning that they are not truly anonymous because anyone can verify the chain of transactions on the basis of the public ledger. At first glance, nothing in the system connects Bitcoins to individuals. However, this anonymous character is far from absolute. It is technically feasible, though to be fair, it is complex and costly, to identify the parties behind a Bitcoin transaction by bringing together factors that accompany such transaction. This essentially makes Bitcoin a pseudo-anonymous coin. Coins which identify as anonymous are not traceable or linkable through the blockchain's transaction history. Next slide. This brings us to privacy coins. Privacy coins are cryptocurrencies that preserve anonymity by obscuring the flow of money across their networks. And so they make it difficult to work out who sent what to whom. Monero is a prime example of privacy coins and one of the topmost coins for the last couple of years. Monero obscures the three parts of any transaction. The sender is hidden through the use of what are known as ring signatures. The amount sent is hidden through a technique called ring CT, and the receiver is also hidden through the use of stealth addresses. So ring signatures, which are used by Monero to hide the sender, mix a user's account keys with public keys, and they create a ring of possible signers, meaning that outside observers cannot link a signature to one specific user. Stealth addresses, on the other hand, which are used to hide the receiver, are randomly generated one-time addresses, which are created for each transaction made by the sender on behalf of the recipient. All the payments sent to the recipient are routed through these addresses, ensuring there are no links on the blockchain between the senders and the recipient's address. Ring CT, on the other hand, which is used in order to hide the amount that is being transacted. So without the use of this ring CT, the original sender of the coins would still be able to trace the coins if they are moved by the recipient by identifying outputs on the blockchain. Ring CT, however, masks these outputs, making the transaction entirely untraceable. And in fact, most jurisdictions that are moving to regulate cryptocurrencies, the issue of cryptocurrencies, as well as crypto service providers, are also limiting heavily the use of these types of privacy coins. Other popular privacy coins include Dash, Zcoin, Beam, and obviously there are a whole host of types of privacy coins. Next slide, please. So these different challenges and risks bring to light the importance of implementing effective regulation, and I'm going to swiftly walk you through a bit what has been happening on our side of the world, and particularly in Malta, which enacted specific crypto legislation back in 2018. Next slide, please. So the EU's fifth AML directive was formally adopted in 2018, and it was the EU's first formal attempt at regulating virtual currencies and virtual currency-related activities. The directive covers crypto to fiat exchanges, so exchanges that convert cryptocurrencies to traditional currencies and vice versa, and custodian wallet providers. And these are thus deemed to be subject persons for AML purposes. The directive defines the term virtual currency, as you can see, as a digital representation of value that is not issued or guaranteed by a central bank or a public authority. It is not necessarily attached to a legally established currency and does not possess a legal status of currency or money, but it is accepted by natural legal persons as a means of exchange, which can be transferred, stored, and traded electronically. Is this definition sufficient? Almost all cryptocurrencies fit within this definition. They are a digital representation of value, which is not issued or guaranteed by a central bank or public authority. It is typically not attached to a legally established currency. It does not possess the legal status of currency or money, and it is electronically transferable, storable, and tradable. The only point of contention to this definition is that to qualify as a virtual currency, the token must be a means of exchange. This means that it should be used to facilitate the sale or purchase of goods between parties and represent the standard of value accepted between parties. The Maltese definition does not limit it to only be a medium of exchange. Now, the majority of cryptocurrencies that we see are, in fact, the main intention behind them is exactly that, to facilitate the sale or purchase of goods. Bitcoin, for example, was intended to be exactly that. But over these last years, we have seen, obviously, advancements in technology and different types of tokens crop up, which obviously can all have potential AML, CFT risks associated with them. So regulators are now looking beyond what we used to think was the traditional cryptocurrency to make sure that, you know, all risks are being assessed accordingly. Next slide. The FATF also came up with its own definition of what is a virtual asset. So a virtual asset, according to the FATF, is a digital representation of value that can be digitally traded or transferred and can be used for payment or investment purposes. As we have seen, especially over these last years, a lot of investors are using cryptocurrencies, not really for the way that they were always intended to be used as a means of payment, but for investment purposes. So I think it's quite important to consider that aspect as well. Virtual assets do not include digital representations of fiat currencies, securities, and other financial assets that are already covered elsewhere in the FATF recommendations. This is a more general definition when compared to the definition of virtual currency under the 5th AML directive. However, it also specifies that when we're looking at cryptocurrencies that have security undertones, what we typically call security tokens, these should not be regulated under this definition of virtual asset, but should continue to be defined under the traditional terms that were previously in the FATF's recommendations. Next slide, please. So there's also the definition of a virtual asset service provider. Now, this mainly covers crypto to fiat and fiat to crypto exchanges, crypto to crypto exchanges, the transfers of virtual assets, safekeeping and/or the administration of virtual assets or instruments enabling control over virtual assets, and participation in and provision of financial services related to an issuer's offer and/or the sale of a virtual asset. So what regulators have aim to do, this was done in Malta and is also being done at EU level, is that we take the traditional services that we're used to under the financial service industry and we transpose them under the cryptocurrency regime, because in essence that is what is really happening. It's just the underlying security or instrument that changes. Next slide. So as I mentioned, in 2018, Malta enacted its own cryptocurrencies licensing regime, and we call this the VFA framework. VFA is a term that the Maltese regulator created to define a particular type of crypto asset, but basically the definition matches both the FATF definition as well as that under the 5th AML directive, bar some minor changes. So the introduction of the VFA framework brought with it the implementation of specific AML rules applicable to the VFA sector. In fact, Malta was the first EU member state to enact specific AML rules with regards to trading and the issuing of cryptocurrencies. Under the Maltese regime, whoever issues a VFA to the public, so whoever conducts an ICO, as well as crypto service providers, are deemed to be subject persons for AML purposes. Next slide, please. So just a very, very basic highlights of what our AML rules require. So operators are required to review their business risk assessment every 6 months and implement any changes as needed. And apart from the standard identification and verification requirements, which are basic for all subject persons, service providers who send or receive VFAs, cryptocurrencies, are also required to collect and retain on file the address from which the VFAs are to be received or to which they are to be sent. The service provider must also ask the customer whether the address relates to a private wallet, a multi-signature wallet, or a custodial wallet. The reason is that private wallets tend to be linked more towards the funding of terrorism and money laundering. The service provider must run checks on that wallet address and, where available, use DLT analytical tools to detect potentially fraudulent transactions and other suspicious activity. Over these last years, because of the highlighted importance of AML-CFT, we have seen different service providers coming up with types of digital tools in order to assist these service providers. Next slide, please. The rules also outline the type of transaction records that must be kept to allow the tracing from where funds were received and or where they are to be sent. The following details must therefore be kept. So we have the customer's identification details, the name of any other party to the transaction, details of the bank account or wallet address used for the transfer of VFAs and or traditional currencies. If we have custodial wallets, the name of the institution which is holding the funds, the value date and the date of the value transfer, and the type and value of the cryptocurrency involved. Next slide. The Maltese AML rules, excuse me. The Maltese AML rules also highlight a number of red flags that these subject persons should look out for. Some of the common red flags are that the customer provides inconsistent, misleading, or false information or documentation. There is adverse media on the customer, the funds being deposited are held in unstable or high-risk jurisdictions, or the customer is involved in illicit activities. I think these are quite standard red flags. Next slide. However, some other red flags to look out for are, for example, when the customer largely uses privacy coins, as we've mentioned, or the customer opens more than one account for the same VFA without providing any reason for doing so, or cases where the funds are received from or transferred to an address with direct or indirect links to darknet marketplaces, mixing services or wallets which are associated with illicit activities. There are lists which include these types of wallets. So kind of like when you do sanctions checks, this is pretty much the same thing, but with wallet addresses. Next slide. The FATF also updated its guidance document, which is applicable to the virtual currency sector less than a year ago in 2021. And it identifies a number of risks related to the sector, such as the use of anonymizing and de-anonymizing techniques, as we've seen, and the risk of not having proper oversight tools, including having employees with the necessary level of knowledge and expertise. So although it is obviously, you will always find people who are experienced in the AML-CFT sector, however, not all people are necessarily knowledgeable with regards to particular techniques and technologies that are involved in the cryptocurrency sphere. The document, the FATF guidance, also provides further guidance on how FATF standards apply to stablecoins and NFTs, which are different types of cryptocurrencies, the licensing and registration of service providers, the implementation of the travel rule, which we'll see in the next slide, and the risks that are faced by peer-to-peer transactions. Next slide, please. So the travel rule was originally recommended by the FATF, and the EU has also agreed on a law which extends the travel rule to crypto assets transfers. So once this new law comes into force, crypto service providers that are licensed in the European Union will be required to send or receive crypto assets. Those service providers that send or receive crypto asset transfers on behalf of customer, they will be required to obtain and submit information on the transaction's originator as well as the beneficiary. In this case, the regulator has agreed that there will be no de minimis threshold, and because of crypto asset specific characteristics and the risk profile, the information obligation will therefore apply to all crypto assets transfers regardless of the transfer value. Service providers.
Cherish, if you could.
Yes, I'm wrapping up. It's just my last slide to go, and I will wrap up.
Excellent. Excellent.
Service providers will also be expected to obtain information on the source and destination of crypto assets involved in a transfer. My last slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Perfect. So my last 2 points with regards to what is next are two. So we have the Anti-Money Laundering Authority, which is being launched in the European Union next year, and it is expected to be operational by 2024. The idea behind this authority is that it will harmonize and coordinate supervisory practices in the EU, for both the financial and the non-financial sector. My last point is with regards to the EU's proposed markets in crypto assets regulation, which will be the main harmonized body of legislation in the European Union for crypto assets and crypto asset service providers. It is a huge body of legislation, which we hope will help to ensure a balanced playing field across all the European Union, and it will also benefit service providers by offering the concept of passporting, which we already have under traditional financial service legislation. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cherish. Excellent presentation. I stand enlightened because my knowledge about cryptocurrencies was almost close to nil, like a layman's knowledge. So for me, everything was, I'm not repeating because we have short of time and we also have some questions. So I will now go over to the last speaker of not only today, but of both the days, Mr. Bryant Moravec. And really, he deserves a medal in US law enforcement. They say KMA club. I will not expand that. He deserves that because since morning 3 o'clock, he is that I already mentioned his passion and commitment it shows. So I will briefly introduce because his introduction will take a long time if I do full, but I will be very brief. That he's currently Director of Anti-Money Laundering and Sanctions Compliance for COFAM Rosin in New York City. He has about 30 years experience and is a federally designated expert in BSA and anti-money laundering. He has testified as expert in court proceedings and also in US Senate Banking Subcommittee, the same committee which I mentioned about after 9/11. Where I was invited to testify. And he has been a special agent with FinCEN and US Secret Service, both the agencies where I happen to have worked a lot closely with them over the years, during my Interpol days with FinCEN and during my CBI days in India with the US Secret Service on tackling the counterfeit US dollars. Not only in Delhi, even outside also. So he's definitely a great expert and he has certifications on as a global sanctions expert and certified anti-money laundering specialist. So his topic is very wide because you can speak on that topic for a few hours if you want. The subject is international legal framework to combat money laundering and terror financing. So, Mr. Moravec, if I may call you Bryant, please keep in mind the time because we also have a few questions that I would definitely like to address. It is addressed to all the speakers. So let us see, now we are starting and please try to finish in 20 minutes. Thank you. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sandhu. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, first off, good morning from New York City. And I'd like to personally thank the Indic Researchers Forum for allowing me to participate in today's event. I'm humbled by the experience and most grateful that I can join such an esteemed group of experts. So today I'm going to talk to you from an individual who has actually created, supervised, maintained, audited, examined international frameworks to combat money laundering and the terror of financing. So what's our charge? What is our mandate? Our mandate in the financial services sector is effective anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism regimes are essential to protect the integrity of markets and of the global financial framework as they help mitigate the factors that facilitate financial abuse. What role does the financial sector play? The financial sector must, number one, deter money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Number two, detect money laundering and the financing of terrorism. And number three, disrupt money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Now, in order to do that, what must we understand? To inform our efforts, we must understand, number one, the ways terrorist organizations use funds. Funding specific terrorist operations, such as direct costs associated with specific operations. Terrorist attacks are funded with as little as $10,000 US. The US Cole bombing and the Madrid train attack were funded for exactly that amount. Broader organizational costs to develop and maintain an infrastructure of organizational support and to promote the ideology of a terrorist organization. And by that, we mean salaries and subsistence and communications, training, travel and logistics, shared funding. Many of these terrorist organizations share funds. Maintaining compromised or complicit charities. Many of these terrorist organizations actually maintain their own charities. And then mass media outlets. They are superlative self-promoters. What else must we understand? We have to understand the ways terrorists raise funds. Raising funds from legitimate sources. We know that terrorists raise funds from charities, legitimate businesses, and self-funding. Many of them are self-funded. But more importantly, they raise funds from criminal proceeds through drug trafficking, credit card and check fraud, extortion, human trafficking, and smuggling. And thirdly, we must understand the way the terrorists move funds. Formal financial sector to include banks and value transfer mechanisms, international trade, cash couriers, alternative remittance systems. Mr. Sandhu talked about hawalas and hundis, and also charities and nonprofit organizations. So the current climate, the international community has made the fight against money laundering and the financing of terrorism a priority. Among the goals of this effort are protecting the integrity and stability of the international financial system, cutting off resources available to terrorists, and making it more difficult for those engaged in crime to profit from their criminal activities. Now, when we develop these programs, these legal programs to combat anti-money laundering and the financing of terrorism, who are the standard setters? They're listed here. First and foremost, and I'm going to go through each one of them here shortly, the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, the European Union Directors on Money Laundering, the FATF-style regional bodies, the Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and the Wolfsburg Group. I'll give you a little overview of each one of them. So with FATF, the pace of the international activity in the AML field accelerated in 1989 when the G7 nations launched FATF at its annual economic summit in Paris, with France serving as its first chair. This multinational group started working toward a coordinated effort against international money laundering. Originally referred to as the G7 Financial Action Task Force, today FATF serves as the vanguard in promulgating AML guidance to governmental bodies around the globe. FATF has brought significant changes to the ways in which financial organizations and businesses around the world conduct their affairs. It's also brought about changes in laws and government operations. This intergovernmental body is based at the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris, where it has its own secretariat. And FATF can be assessed online. So everything relative to FATF, its guidance, is available online. So FATF's stated objectives are to set standards and promote effective implementation of legal, regulatory, and operational measures for combating money laundering, terrorist financing, and other related threats to the integrity of the international financial system. Starting with its own members, the FATF monitors countries' progress in implementing the FATF recommendations, reviews money laundering and terrorist financing techniques, and countermeasures, and promotes the adoption and implementation of the FATF recommendations globally. FATF fulfill these obligations, these objectives, by focusing on several important tasks, including spreading the AML message worldwide, monitoring implementation of the FATF recommendations among its members, reviewing money laundering trends and countermeasures. Now, the FATF 40 recommendations, this is really the preamble. This is what drives us in our creation of these global compliance programs. The key element of FATF's efforts is its detailed list of appropriate standards for countries to implement. These measures are detailed in the 40 recommendations, which were first issued in 1990 and have since been revised. FATF has also issued various interpretive notes, which are designed to clarify the application of specific recommendations and provide additional guidance. FATF recommendations have become the world's blueprint for effective national and international AML and counter-financing terrorism controls. The IMF and the World Bank have recognized the FATF recommendations as the international standard for combating money laundering and terrorist financing. The IMF, World Bank, and FATF use a common methodology to assess compliance with the FATF recommendations. Of significance is that FATF identifies jurisdictions with strategic deficiencies in their AML and counter-financing terrorism regimes. 23 grade-listed countries lie on that list today, as well as those significant strategies with strategic significant deficiencies. 2 blacklisted countries are on that list. Iran and North Korea are those 2 countries. The FATF 40 recommendations provide a complete set of countermeasures against money laundering and terrorist financing, covering the following elements: the identification of risk, development of appropriate policies, criminal justice and law enforcement, financial system and its regulation, transparency of legal persons and arrangements, and international cooperation. And again, 37 countries are members of the FATF, to include India. The Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. The Committee on Banking Supervision, established in 1974 by the central bank governors of the Group 10 countries, promotes sound supervisory standards worldwide. The committee is the primary global standard setter for the prudential regulation of banks and provides a forum for cooperation on banking supervision matters. Its mandate is to strengthen the regulation, supervision, and practices of banks worldwide to enhance financial stability. The committee is best known for its landmark publications on capital adequacy, Basel I, II, and III. And the committee's secretariat is located at the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, and is staffed by many professional supervisors on temporary assignment from member institutions. In 1988, the Basel Committee issued a statement of principles called Prevention of Criminal Use of the Banking System for the Purpose of Money Laundering, in recognition of the vulnerability of the financial sector to misuse by criminals. This was the committee's first AML-CFT commitment and a first step for preventing the use of the banking sector for money laundering. The statement set out principles with respect to customer identification, compliance with laws, conformity with high ethical standards and local laws and regulations, full cooperation with national law enforcement to the extent permitted without breaching customer confidentiality, staff training, record keeping, and audits. And in 1997, the Basel Committee issued its core principles for effective banking supervision, a basic reference for authorities worldwide. It stated that banking supervisors must determine that banks have adequate policies, practices, and procedures in place, including strict know your customer rules that promote high ethical and professional standards in the financial sector and prevent the bank from being used intentionally or unintentionally by criminal elements. In 2004 of October, the committee released another important publication on Know Your Customer, Consolidated KYC Risk Management, as a complement to its customer due diligence for banks issued in 2001 of October. The 2004 paper examines the critical elements of effective management of Know Your Customer risks throughout a banking group and addresses the need for banks to adopt a global approach and apply the elements necessary for a sound KYC program to both the parent bank or head office and all its branches and subsidiaries. And in 2014, the Basel Committee issued guidelines on sound management of risk related to money laundering and financing of terrorism that supervised previous publications on customer due diligence for banks and Know Your Customer risk management. The goal of the guidelines was to support banking supervisors and banks in the implementation of FATF recommendations concerning AML and counter-financing of terrorism within the wider contents of banking supervision standards, drawing from the expertise of both organizations and working to avoid duplication. And the Reserve Bank of India is a member of the Basel Committee. The European Union, directives on money laundering. The directives are issued periodic by the European Parliament and implemented by member states as part of domestic legislation. The directives are intended to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing and establish a consistent regulatory environment across the European Union while allowing some flexibility based on local laws. And this is done by addressing the emerging money laundering and terrorist financing topologies, helping to close AML compliance gaps. The EU's first directive of the European Parliament and the Council was issued in June of 1991, and 7 total directives have been issued by the Council to date. Like all directives adopted by the Council, it's required by member states to achieve the specified results by amending national law if necessary. Now, the unique nature of the EU as a community of states makes it fundamentally different from other international organizations. The EU can adopt measures that are the force of law even without the approval of the national parliaments of their various member states. In addition, European law prevails over national law in the case of directives. In this respect, EU directives have far more weight than the voluntary standards issued by groups such as the Basel Committee or the FATF. Of course, the directives apply only to EU member states and not to other countries. Now, the FATF-style regional bodies. There are 9 FATF-style regional bodies which have similar forms and functions to that of FATF. They're also considered FATF associate members in setting standards. FATF depends on input from the FATF-style regional bodies as much as from its own members. However, FATF remains the only standard-setting body. And many FATF member countries are also members of the 9 FATF-style regional bodies. And India is a participating member in the Asia-Pacific Group on Money Laundering, as well as the Eurasian Group. FATF-style Action Task Force of Latin America, Intergovernmental Action Group Against Money Laundering in West Africa, the Middle East and Northern African Action Task Force, and also the Task Force on Money Laundering in Central Africa comprise a complete list of FATF-style regional bodies. The Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units. In 1995, several national financial intelligence units began working together in an informal organization known as the Egmont Group, named for the location of its first meeting at the Egmont Arenberg Palace in Brussels. The goal of the group is to provide a forum for financial intelligence groups around the world to improve cooperation and establish the environment needed to foster trust among countries to securely share sensitive information in the fight against money laundering and the financing of terrorism. The support provided by the Egmont Group includes serving as the operational arm of the international AML-CFT apparatus, providing a platform for the secure exchange of expertise in financial intelligence to combat money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism, expanding and systemizing cooperation and the reciprocal exchange of information, increasing the effectiveness of FIUs by offering training and promoting personal exchanges to improve the expertise and capabilities of personnel employed by FIUs, fostering better and secure communications among FIUs through the application of technology such as the Egmont Secure Web, promoting the operational autonomy of FIUs, and promoting the establishment of FIUs in conjunction with jurisdictions with an AML-CFT program in place or in areas with the program in the early stages of development. And the Financial Intelligence Unit India is a member of the Asia and Pacific Regional Group, which is comprised of FIUs from 28 member jurisdictions. And last but not least, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. They become more active in combating money laundering by concentrating on money laundering over other forms of financial abuse, helping to strengthen financial supervision and regulation in countries, more closely interacting with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, and insisting on the application of international AML standards in countries that require financial assistance. The World Bank and the IMF established a collaborative framework with FATF for conducting comprehensive assessments using a single global methodology of countries' compliance with FATF recommendations. And this assessment is carried out as part of the Financial Sector Assessment Program, as well in the report of the observance of standards and codes. And in 2002, the World Bank and the IMF developed a reference guide for anti-money laundering and combating financing of terrorism in an effort to provide practical steps for countries implementing AML and CFT regimes in accordance with international standards. The guide describes the global problem of money laundering and terrorist financing on the development agendas of individual countries and across regions. It explains the basic elements required to build an effective AML and CFT legal and institutional framework, and summarizes the role of the World Bank and the IMF in those efforts. And then finally, the Wolfsburg Group. Named after the castle in Switzerland where its first working session was held, the Wolfsburg Group is an association of global financial institutions, including Banco Santander, Bank of America, Bank of Tokyo, Mitsubishi, Barclays, Citigroup, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, HSBC, JP Morgan Chase, Societe Generale, Standard Chartered Bank, and UBS. In 2000, along with Transparency International and experts worldwide, the institutions developed global anti-money laundering guidelines for international private banks. Since then, it's issued several other guidelines on correspondent banking and terrorist financing, among others. So what have the standards provided us? The standards provide a complete set of countermeasures against money laundering and terrorist financing, covering the following elements. It defines the terms money laundering and terrorist financing, which are distinctly different. Mr. Sandhu talked about those differences. It identifies the topologies used by money launderers and terror financiers. It identifies higher risk customers, products, services, and geographies. It develops appropriate policies. It requires the performance of adequate customer due diligence commensurate with risk. It creates financial system regulation. It creates transparency of legal persons and arrangements and the identification and verification of customers and beneficial owners. It promotes international activity and cooperation. It provides technical assistance. And most importantly, the standards require the reporting of suspicious activity to national FIUs. And with that, I'm completed. And hopefully I kept within the time period.
Brian,
So you're on mute.
let me go over. I had two connections because in between I had lost connection, so I quickly shifted the second one. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me close this one so that two do not. Okay, I'm closing. So thank you very much, Brian. It was a very comprehensive detail of all the international legal framework to combat money laundering and terror financing, and all those organizations you covered very well. And just would like to, of course, I used to, in those good old days when I was in Interpol, I used to regularly attend meetings of observer. As an Interpol observer, we were observer organization. PCRE meeting, EGMO groups meetings, CFATFs and FATFs, APGs, then ADB. So quite a lot of those meetings I used to attend, and definitely all these organizations are doing a great work in their own capacity, and especially in Caribbean region, which is closer to US, and US has a lot of interest in that region. So Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, because those days USA used to send a very big delegation from all the departments. That was prior to having this Homeland Security Department. So excellent, within that limited time, you gave an excellent account. Just for, I think you missed it, I would like to add that FATF has got 39 members because 37 are countries and 2 are regional organizations. You missed it, so I thought I just clarify. If somebody reads it 39, they may not say that you missed it.
Yeah.
So 2 are those regional organizations, European Commission and GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council.
That is correct.
But they're treated as members and not as not in the other groups. Okay.
Very good catch, Mr.
Excellent
Sandhu.
one. So I will thank all of you. and in particular yours, I specifically mentioned a few times because you have been up since very early morning. We have a few questions, so let us see if in next 5-10 minutes we can address, because since my connection was lost, I lost those questions here.
Sir,
So-
I will be taking up the questions for you.
So I'll take up the question, sir.
I can read from this phone if I go. Or you can read the first one meanwhile.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll take up the questions which are directed to Mr. Brian first, since he has been waiting since the morning. So the first question is by Shamujit Mukherjee. He has asked, how effective is the international CFC system if Iran has been on the FATF blacklist since 2008? And as far as the US continues to finance terrorist groups, that is US designated terrorist groups, since many of them are not designated as terrorists by the UN, shouldn't the objective of a blacklist be to help the countries get out of it by improving their systems and regulations?
Yes, I would agree that I think we need to take a more global approach as it relates to blacklisting terrorist organizations. That is an absolute weakness where I think we do a good job in the sanctions regimes, but with the identification and sanctioning of terrorist organizations, I don't think we do a good job of sharing commonalities there. And as it relates to Iran, I think Iran continues to be, a continuing weakness through their export of oil commodities. I mean, that economy, although it's got some of the greatest sanctions in place, to only superseded by that of North Korea, I think there is still some leaking in that regime, not only from a sanctions standpoint, but also from a terror financing standpoint as well. They continue to be on the blacklist with North Korea since 2008. You are correct, due to the fact that we recognize the deficiencies with Iran, but I think we still there's a way to go to still plug some of the leaks there as it relates to both Iran and also North Korea.
Thank you so much,
sir.
Brian. For Anamitra, there were three questions in my old
Yes, sir.
chat.
I'm
I
just
could
going
not
one by
get it.
one.
They are
Yeah.
for each one. So, Mr. Jagannathan,
Yes. I'll just go. I'll just
so all
take
three,
up
if
the
you could
questions.
read, I cannot see them. I remember
Yes, sir. I'll
from
just
my
take up
memory,
one by
but
one,
you
sir.
can read
No
it.
issues.
Yeah, please.
The next question is by Shiraz Hassan to Mr. Maverick again. As we are aware that, this terrorist organization, they use charities. Most of the time, maybe cash charities to fund the terror attacks. For example, the Al-Qaeda terrorist Wadi al-Haq, which is called to New York in 1991 to help the direct Al-Khifa refugee center, funding the terrorist activities. So how do you think the world would tackle finance terrorism in the line of human rights laws and legislation, specifically when these activities are running behind the scenes in a normal community charities and local centers?
Man, I don't even know where to begin on that. That's a pretty comprehensive question. I think the use of charities continues, at least from the U.S. standpoint, continues to be the greatest area of risk. We continue to see charities collect small funds from across the globe, particularly, say, in the United States, among the Somali community, to fund terrorist activities in Yemen. So there's a lot of great charities out there doing very good work. And then there are charities which are shell charities or charities that are funded by terrorist organizations. I think what we have to be careful in not doing is we've got to perform the commensurate level of due diligence on these charities to understand who are actually behind them, where the sources of funding go, so we don't inadvertently, shut down a good charity. But again, from the regulatory perspective in the United States, charities, and I'm speaking from the recovering OCC senior bank examiner, as well as at FinCEN and the Secret Service agent, we saw the use of charities. We continue to see the use of charities to promote terror financing across the globe. So it's a very slippery slope where we can't be too oppressive to them. So make sure that we don't shut down that activity, which is necessary across the globe.
Thank you, sir.
I would
I
like
just have
to-
a follow-up question to this, because, as a layman, as a layperson, I believe, at times we do get involved into CSR activities. And a lot of times, when we given the aid, or maybe we are doing some kind of charity, even when it comes to the case for United Nations as well, most of the time, maybe 90% of it doesn't reach the actual source, and then it gets into some kind of a closed door, and it's being, redirected to something else. So maybe it might go even in the terrorist camps as well. So how do you think as a layman, we should be much more aware to whom to actually, go ahead and donate those for that case?
Well, I mean, so again, it's all about research. So in the United States, we have tremendous transparency on charities. What's really nice is that you can take a charity and dissect it and understand actually how much money is going to, say, cost for administrative costs, and then how much is actually going out to do good work. So we can leverage that kind of data here in the United States to make a determination as to whether or not that charity is performing as designed. So, if a charity is collecting money and 90% of it goes to administrative costs, paying salaries, payroll, things of that nature, we know that's not an effective charity. But a charity where 10% goes to administrative costs and 90% goes to, performing good work, that type of charity is the one that, you'd want to support. So again, all countries are different, but be able to do that requisite level of due diligence on each charity to identify administrative costs based on how much money is actually going to promote their work.
Mr. Devi Prasad. So this is a question by Yash Pun. Why hasn't the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism piloted by India in 1996 been adopted by UNSC yet? What are the steps? What stops the international community despite the major terror incidents like the 9/11, etc.?
Primarily the problem is lack of political consensus. When you talk about a draft convention, there are so many drafts which are floating, and there is a ad hoc committee of the General Assembly where all these are debated and discussed. But the problem is when you take a particular word that is dissected from multiple angles. I will just give one example about the self-determination movements or the freedom fighters. Now that's someone's freedom fighter, maybe terrorist of another country. Now, how do you exactly do the wording where, you can have an exception? It's a majority opinion that we shouldn't have any kind of relaxation or waiver or concession for any particular group. There cannot be any reason to justify terrorism, be that political or otherwise. The moment you have one, then that would give scope for multiple ways by which terrorism can be perpetrated. So it's without any condition, it has to be a very comprehensive definition. Now, if you see India's draft and even India's definition in the UAPA is a very comprehensive one. It covers both men and material and all kinds of possible threats, attempts, financing, and the weapons of mass destruction, every possible way. But unfortunately, the international community, on the one hand, they have come out with a comprehensive, consensual, and voting for the 1999 Financing Convention. But when it comes to the nitty-gritties of having a comprehensive convention for terrorism, then the differences are there. The Middle East group, particularly, they are not agreeable to have an unconditional definition. So it's primarily, to make it brief, there is lack of political consensus to come out with a comprehensive convention on terrorism?
I'll go to Mr. Jagannathan. This is a question by Yash Pant. Sir, you showed the global distribution of terror incidents with South Asia, leading the list, particularly Afghanistan and Pakistan. What are your opinions regarding the consistent US interference in the Afpak region with the financing of the Afghan jihad and aid support to Pakistan during the Cold War era, responsible for the spurt of terror activities?
See, the only, if in one sentence, you will have to react to this. When it comes to terrorism, every country, whether it is coming to, terrorism or any other matter, every country looks for its own national interest. If we go by that logic, we'll have to, protect our own borders. That is why at the end of my presentation, I have come to that conclusion. These international conventions, treaties, all that are there just to be, help you if you have an influence with the other country to get your way. I mean, these are all possibilities. These are all intentions. Beyond that, if you have to, analyze the implications for all this, what the US is doing in Afghanistan or with Pakistan, of course, that country, I mean, for that matter, any country, they calculate their own national interest. I mean, simply we all will have to probably take the same thumb rule. We also should operate in our own national interest. And that national interest is that if we are able to, have our influence, diplomatic or otherwise, on Pakistan, especially on Afghanistan, and probably if you're able to convince the United States of America, and if they are convinced about the implications for us, that is where the way forward. For that, I can only conclude by saying it is the economic heft of the country. I mean, that has to be the primary focus, and the rest of the, the problems can be taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll now move to Ms. Abella. Ma'am, I have a question for you. Since blockchain is very hard to track and it is increasingly adopted by citizens across the world, do you think it will challenge the fundamental existence of central banks in the economies? And how far is the world cooperating with the regulating the flow of such cryptocurrencies?
So I think it is important to recognize the level of disruptive technology that cryptocurrencies truly are. And I think that regulators as well as authorities worldwide, including central banks, are slowly coming on board with the fact that this is a technology that is here to stay. So in fact, for example, the European Banking Authority has over these last years, we're looking more into the concept of the regulation of stablecoins, and we're also discussing the idea of having a digital euro. So rather than kind of pushing away the concept of cryptocurrencies, the European Banking Authority is more looking at embracing it. The ECB has also issued, proposals and documentation in this regard. The regulation of cryptocurrencies goes against the reason why they were created in the first place. But the free-for-all approach that we had before we started regulating was creating too much of a laissez-faire kind of attitude. And this led to too many MLFT risks and investor protection risks. So I think that is why it is very important to ensure that the sector is regulated, while at the same time, embracing it into everyday life.
Thank you. The second question for you is, are there any specific cases of terrorists using tumblers or mixtures or, anonymous coins like Monero or Zcash the general use of cases has been always related to Bitcoin or Ethereum, which is usually, tracked through blockchain. While privacy coins and tumblers are high-risk assets in the field of narco trade, money laundering and arms trade and other crimes, how specifically are they related to, financing terrorism?
Yeah, so privacy coins like Monero, for example, tend to be more recently, obviously, they are tending to be more used on the dark web, for example, as a means of payment. I cannot pinpoint a specific case, but I know that there have been instances where, for example, terrorist groups were accepting funding solely through the use of privacy coins, such as Monero, such as Dash. If I remember correctly, there was even a report issued by the European Union mentioning one such specific instance where there was a Twitter account that was seeking to accept funding, you asking specifically for payment through Monero. So there are instances, obviously, as the person who asked the question pointed out, there might not be a lot of use cases, also bearing in mind that Monero hasn't been around as much as Bitcoin has, for example. But that is also why it is very important to ensure that there is proper regulation of these types of coins.
Thank you. I just have a final question for you. Since countries are mandated to apply the travel rule for VASPs as per the updated interpretive note of recommendation 15 FATF, but most countries have been too slow to implement these rules or haven't acted on them at all. Are regulations like AMLD, or in your case, maybe, the national regulation for Malta, actually effective since transactions go much beyond the national and the EU boundaries?
So obviously, anyone that is seeking to be licensed in Malta, and once we have the MiCA regulation, so anyone that would be seeking to be authorized in the European Union as a crypto service provider, they would need to comply, obviously, with, in our case, the Maltese and the EU AML rules, specifically for crypto service providers. And I think one of the reasons why we have actually seen a slower uptake in service providers seeking to be authorized in Malta, in the UK, and other EU member states that already have some form of regulation is exactly because they are not able to meet the AML requirements that are set both by the EU AMLD directives and national criteria. So as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, the UK FCA had in fact mentioned only 13% of the applicants were capable of meeting its AML requirements. That is a very, very small percentage. We don't have specific statistics here in Malta, but knowing the kind of level of interest that we had in 2018 when the crypto regime came into force in Malta, and then the number of service providers that were actually licensed, I would imagine that one of the reasons why we have a less amount than the number of applicants we had back in 2018 is exactly that. Even when I talk to clients, a lot of people are still quite hesitant of being authorized as service providers in a jurisdiction where there is a lot of AML restrictions, let's call them that. So I still find the clients who would be more willing to go to a jurisdiction where there are no AML rules because they are more capable of operating as they wish without any restrictions. But once this proposed law comes into force, because the travel rule, as I mentioned, is being extended in the EU for crypto assets, it is being aligned together with the MiCA regulation. So once it comes into force, anyone that wishes to be licensed in the European Union will need to comply with this rule as well. If they don't, obviously, they might not be authorized. And if they are already authorized, they will be fined and possibly the license gets taken away. Then it is the role of national FCAs to ensure that service providers are actually complying with the rules.
Thank you, ma'am. Yashas, can we take one more question, the final question?
Paramitra, I think we are short of time, so I'll let's hand it over to Harjeet Sandhu sir, so he can deliver sir's closing
remarks.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Yashas. I know there are some questions, and Anamitra, you can note down that, and we can respond to the person
Yes,
in the chat box as a response, because some organizations take it as a separate response. Are you able to hear me? Because I have again same problem.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you're perfectly audible.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So let me close one voice because I'm hearing two voices. Just 1 second. Okay. Yeah, thank you. I know it has been long and we went over a few minutes. So first I would like to thank all the speakers, all the co-panelists with me on this very, very absorbing and excellent session. This session itself could have been a full subject of a full day conference. We had to, and hats off to all my co-panelists who managed to condense all the information within that much time. And I really appreciate all of them, Bryant Moravec, Devidas, Jagannathan, and Cherish Abela. All of them, a huge applause from my side because they made my job easy. So that's why I, in the beginning, tried to say very little because I knew they all are, they could cover anything. And my special thanks go to the audience because without them, none of the speakers makes any sense. And out of the audience, particular special mention I would like to make of General SVP Singh, because he's the one who waited till the last part. Because when a movie is about to finish, most of the people know it is finishing and they start leaving. So thank you, General SVP Singh. You stayed till the end. I really appreciate that. Of course, individual speakers over 2 days, a large number of them, they made excellent presentations, and I'm not going to thank each one individually because it will be very long. They really did a lot, and I in particular learned a lot from them. Then my thanks to the Indic Research Forums, especially Yashash Arya and the 3 hosts who were, I think 3 hosts were Satya Pulukuri, I still see him, he's there, Anamitra Banerjee and Argish Akolkar. I don't see him, maybe he switched off his camera. So thanks to them also. And I also wish to congratulate Indic Researchers Forum on completing 1 year. So this is a huge round of applause for Yashas and his team. This is the anniversary of Indic Researchers Forum. Well done, all of you. You are youngsters full of energy. Please remain enthusiastic like this. And I tell you, you are going to do wonders. You will not let the professionals rest. The way you keep on raising these issues, I think those people who are in the decision-making capacity, they will definitely listen to you. At least, you know, we can set your own house in order. So at least we can start locally. There are few things what can be done there. People keep on talking of many times having legislation, but what is already existing, we need to concentrate on enforcing those what we already have. So with this, I think I once again thank all those who stayed there, audience in particular, and thank you very much for staying with us till the end. And I hand it over back to Yashas for any administrative thing you need to say or do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Back to Anamitra for your last.
Thank you, sir, so much. I would like to thank all the speakers, the session chairs, the participants for taking out your time and, you know, sharing valuable knowledge with us and making this International Counter-Terrorism Conference for the past 2 days a huge success. We are all delighted to have you all today. And I also thank the audience for your patience and active participation. We do look forward to hosting you all in the future conferences as well. You can also check out our social media handles for regular updates. And on behalf of the Indic Researchers Forum, we would also like to present all of you who have attended at least 6 sessions with participation certificates. I personally thank you all for such a thought-provoking and enriching session and this entire conference as well. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night, and Jai Hind.